It's not a magic trick, by the way, it's just my flip chart.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
all done?
Yeah. Would you like to introduce yourself a bit?
I will do that, absolutely, I will do that. Excuse me while I slurp. I don't perform until I've had about 4 cups of tea, and they run out of Earl Grey. I'm now sipping Orange Blossom Grove something. It's horrible, but it'll keep my throat dry.
Yeah, that's what we call tea in Finland.
Well, it's Twinings, so at least it's not Lipton's. If it's Lipton's, there would be an excuse. Can you hear me at the back?
Yeah.
Yes? Great. I don't want to shout too loudly because we've got a young child in the corner there. I don't want to wake the child up. Obviously a future entrepreneur from Oulu being subliminally brainwashed with all this information at such an early age. Yes, I'll introduce myself. I'm Perry Dain from our Business Finland office in London. An Englishman with a French name working for the Finland Trade Commission. It confuses a lot of people, believe me. I've been with the organisation for 17 years, so in that time I've learnt quite a bit of information about how to represent Finnish companies in the UK, and I will address some of those issues a bit later. I don't have slides, I've got my flip chart. Before I start, there are a number of Business Finland colleagues in the audience. If they could just wave their hands, stand up. There's quite a few. So, well, there's lovely people from all over the country who are employed to do roughly what I do, which is to help you guys go international. So I'm hoping that by the end of today's session, there'll be a bit more clarity. Well, I'd like to think there's clarity now. But if there isn't clarity now, hopefully by the end of today's session, and the round tables and the one-to-ones, there will be. We did a similar session in Helsinki in August. It went very well. So we're now rolling these Business Finland days throughout the country. I'm going to ask a few questions. Please don't feel intimidated. They're just to help me understand a bit more about you. I'll ask the first question is hands up, excluding those who just put their hands up because they don't count. Hands up those of you who have heard of Business Finland. That's most, and the ones who didn't perhaps were preoccupied. So that's most, okay. That's a fairly decent number, and I would expect that. It would be a bit of a shame if nobody had heard, particularly as you've registered for a seminar, or you're here for the coffee and the rolls, and I'm sure that's not the case. So the second question is, how many of you know what we do? Now the ratios again, not alarming. I'm not disappointed. I'm actually in a way quite pleased. It means what you're going to hear from me, you'll probably hear for the first time, so you won't be bored. But that's a fairly accurate ratio. Obviously, as a brand, what was FinPro, which many of you may have known, Tekes has always had a very strong brand in Finland. Tekes, their reputation went before them, and still does. Obviously, I don't speak Finnish, so I don't know what my lovely colleague Juha was describing, but I'm fairly confident it was music to your ears because he was talking about how he really has an immense, overwhelming desire to give you lots and lots of money. That's what I assume from my experience. So Tekes as a brand was very, very strong. The FinPro brand wasn't so strong. And it's no surprise to me that even though many of you may know what Tekes does, ex-Tekes, as in the Business Finland innovation funding people now, I'm confident that not many of you know what we actually do in the global network. So I'm hoping today that I may be able to enlighten you in what we do in the network. And what I'd like to do, if it's possible, is keep this interactive. So if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to interrupt me. For 2 reasons. It will reduce the boredom in the audience, and secondly, give me a time to catch my breath and catch my thoughts. So please don't hesitate to interrupt me if there's something I've said that 1, you don't understand, or 2, you'd like to hear a bit more about. So please do that. Okay, so again, Perry Dain, London office. I've been with the organisation for 17 years, working in the London Trade Centre. And as you can imagine, 17 years, that's quite a bit of an experience. And I have probably introduced hundreds, not probably, without any degree of doubt, introduced hundreds of Finnish companies to hundreds of decision makers in UK companies. So it was very easy for me, very quickly, to be honest, to harvest a lot of highly valuable information from those meetings and to somehow codify them into something meaningful for you guys. Much of this is anecdotal. I didn't read it in a book. I didn't study it at university. In fact, my background is newspaper publishing. So I was a hot metal compositor back in the late 70s, having studied typography at the London College of Printing. And then for some bizarre reason, somebody felt it would be a good idea to employ me into an IT marketing role about 10 years later. Which totally bewildered me at the time, bewilders me now, but it worked out pretty well. My job prior to being employed by Business Finland was I was head of corporate marketing for Europe for AT&T Telecoms, launching their data services. So I've got quite a bit of experience from technology marketing. I was very lucky to work for AT&T. They had an extraordinarily good team in the UK, from whom I learnt a lot. I kept this shut and I kept these open, which is why I've made a note here about the importance of listening. I'll come to that later. And that wonderful period of my career in the late 90s underpinned the knowledge and expertise that I was able to share, and I still am able to share with Finnish companies even today. Again, compounded by 17 years of experience of introducing Finnish companies to UK decision makers, mostly at C-level. So what do I do in the network? My role is a senior advisor. And our service offering in the network is non-chargeable. So as Finnish taxpayers, you get me for free. I come without a price tag. Obviously, as a taxpayer, you pay, but there's no charge. And our service offering varies depending on the company, the type of company, and the stage at which that company is. So for example, traditionally, I've advised, or in my previous identity within the organization as a consultant, I consulted mainly small to medium enterprise. But because of what we can describe as the Nokia fallout, if I may do so, there are now far more, considerably more startups that I'm advising. And I like advising startups because they're lovely people, they're fun to work with, and typically being Finnish, they have lots of wonderful, wonderful ideas. And we have a case study later by a huge success story from Finland. It's got a global phenomenon. And that, to be frank and to be blunt, that gets me out of bed in the morning. It's a wonderful thing. My friends in the UK say, Perry, you have the best job in the world. And I have no reason to dispute that. I do actually have, and I think most of my colleagues would agree, this is a lovely job. It's a nice company to work for because we do something that's very, very pleasant to do. And that's help companies like you get abroad. It's immensely enjoyable and pleasurable. So much of my time in London is devoted to coaching Finnish companies on some of the basics. We're limited under guidance from your government on what we can do. But I was born a rule breaker. So long as you don't tell anybody, I'm happy to break the rules. But we have there are certain parameters of which we can work in and certain parameters we cannot work in. But much of my time is devoted to sharing my knowledge with Finnish companies about the UK and about internationalization and about routes to markets and about the importance of marketing and about how to develop a good, powerful and compelling story that I believe will be compelling, relevant and meaningful to the relevant community in the UK. The UK as a market, it's difficult to ignore Brexit. I was watching the BBC News in the hotel yesterday and it's It's like Monty Python. I mean, it's crazy. It's surreal and very frightening at the same time. But trying to ignore Brexit, which is difficult to do, that it's my strong belief, overwhelming belief, that whatever the Brexit outcome is, that will have very little impact on the ability to do business. To me, the worst scenario in the Brexit will be that there will be administrative burdens and bureaucratic burdens that don't exist currently because we're in the EU. So if I'm, as I do, as part of my job, as essentially as a trade commissioner, because in the UK I promote myself shamelessly as a representative of the Finnish embassy, which I am, strictly speaking. In the UK, I represent myself as a trade commissioner for the Embassy of Finland. I do that for two reasons. One, it's true. And secondly, as a marketeer, I do what I need to do as a marketeer to create a brand about myself and a story about myself that will help me push and open a closed door. And of course, if I represent the Embassy of Finland, as I do, because I should have some cards on me. Yeah, in Finland, I will probably give out my Business Finland card, obviously. I don't have any, but in the UK, I have an embassy card. Because in the UK, my brand is Dain, Trade Commissioner from the Finnish Embassy, and that allows me to push against an open door, not hammer on a closed door. And when I say me, I'm pushing on a closed door on your behalf. It's you I'm opening that door for. So a number of facts that I think are factors that are very, very important for you all to take note of. Despite Brexit, the UK will always be a very, very easy market for you to enter for a number of reasons. One, the English speak English almost as well as the Finnish do, okay? So there are no language barriers at all. The Finns speak English beautifully because they're well educated, which is why I stress they do speak it better than most English people do, because they speak it with the correct grammar, and most English people don't, including me. Politically, the UK has always been and will always be an extraordinarily stable political environment. It's very, like Finland, very stable political environment, and also a very lawful environment. Unlike many international environments where you may have, some of my colleagues, there's a few nodding their heads, I won't point fingers, but they've worked in environments where perhaps the issues around lawfulness and integrity may be an issue that you have to encounter. In fact, if I was working in some territories, I may say, before you even consider developing a marketing and sales strategy, let's do some coaching on how to get through this minefield of honesty and integrity. In the UK, that does not exist. The UK is a highly politically stable, always will be, always has been, and a lawful environment. There are little or no regulatory barriers. Brexit may introduce some, but those barriers, I'm convinced, because I can't see any reason why they would be anything other than administrative and bureaucratic. In the same way, if you're an American company, or a Chinese company, or an Indian company, or an Australian company, etc., coming into the UK, or Finland, you'd have to apply for visas, get work visas, and do stuff that I'm not aware of, because I've never had to advise companies on this, but presumably when the ink is drying on the Brexit settlement, whenever that is, I then have to preoccupy myself with some of the administrative and bureaucratic issues that Finnish companies don't currently have to encounter, but a Chinese, American, Australian, Indian company does. So that, to me, can only be the worst scenario. And also, the UK, commercially, is a nice environment to do business. There are no commercial barriers. In fact, there are few barriers. How am I doing for time? I've got 4 minutes. Okay. There are few barriers in the UK which will stop you entering. The only barriers that I'll spend the next 4 minutes describing are probably related to marketing. They're related to storytelling. And this is what I did learn when I attended all those meetings, probably hundreds of meetings over 17 years, listening to the needs and drivers and desires of the UK business community and how they can be addressed by the Finnish companies that I'm representing. So for example, one of the things that I did learn is that UK people love to hear a story that's told passionately and enthusiastically by somebody who understands their issues, understands their problems. It could be something that that Finnish company has done for a competitor or a similar company. I know from experience that when the Finnish company tells a good story, I can tell by the body language that the UK guy is suddenly relaxed. He's getting it, he understands it. So when I'm consulting companies, and as I said, more and more of them are startups, I ask them a number of questions. The first question I ask is, why? Why? A lot of companies can talk effortlessly and endlessly about what they do. Some of them insist, against my advice, to talk about how they do it. The technology. Even though, of course, I'm being flippant, the technology is important. There may be some meetings where the company says we need to understand more about the technology. If it was cybersecurity, it's almost certain there'd be some technological issues. But most meetings, they're interested in perhaps the what. What do you do? What do you do? What can you do? And how can that help me? So what I urge the companies that I'm advising to do, and have done for many years, is to get them to talk about the why. Why am I doing this? Because that goes down to the storytelling. And the storytelling is very important in some markets. Suppose worked in different markets. Is storytelling important in your marketing, or is it down to technology and so markets are different. So I can only talk on behalf of the UK, and I've worked for 11 years for American companies, so I'm speaking with my American marketing hat on, mainly when I'm talking about storytelling. And the reason that storytelling is important for me is because Finnish companies are very strong at technology. They're world class at technology. And when I'm, as an embassy official, this is being filmed, I hope this is okay to me to say some of it, but as an embassy official, when I'm pushing against an open door, one of the reasons that door is open, apart from the fact that an embassy official has contacted the CEO and he's quite intrigued, why would the Finnish embassy contact me on behalf of this Finnish company? There must be something important. They know in the UK that Finland has a very, very powerful technological proposition. But where the Finns may need a bit of extra work is on the marketing. And the reason I say this is because when the Finns go into a meeting, they've got 4 aces. They've got 4 aces. If an American goes into the meeting, he's got a loaded gun. And a loaded gun beats 4 aces every single time. So it's very important that you enchant and intrigue the person you're speaking to with storytelling. Other questions I will ask the community, particularly startups. I've got 1.5 minutes, okay. The second question I will ask is, for whom do you believe you have value? For whom do you believe you have value? And it's surprising how many people can't answer that question. Surprising. Bewilders me. Mainly because it defies the laws of marketing. If you don't know who the target audience is, why have you developed the solution that you're trying to market to them? Because if you do know the community of business interest for whom you have value, that obviously is your target audience. And if you don't know who your target audience is, how can you develop a value proposition that is compelling, relevant and meaningful to that business community if you don't know who they are. So that's one of the first challenges that I ask. Why do you do it, and for whom does it have value? That in itself gives companies a bit of homework. I've got 30 seconds. And the other thing that I ask them to do, and I help them to do, which I'll finish on, then we can do some questions, is we try to predict and visualize the barriers to market entry. And having worked in marketing and sales for many years, I know that there are fundamentally 3 barriers. There are barriers to purchase, as in if you're selling, it could be your inability in the UK to storytell. It could be your inability to tell them why, and so forth, which will end it at the first meeting. Because if you don't understand my needs and drivers as your potential customer, how can I possibly buy from you? I want to buy from you, but you've not given me enough clues about why I should buy from you. So that is an obvious barrier to purchase. If you've overcome that and it's been purchased, that's great. The sales director's happy because one of his team's made a sale, he's got an order, so that goes towards his monthly targets, his quarterly targets. That's all the sales director really cares about. He doesn't care about you. He cares about the CEO not sacking him because he hasn't met his quarterly targets. So tactically, it's great to get purchases because it goes into the order book towards those quarterly targets. But the next barrier, of course, is adoption. And that's a challenge. And that's where it goes from selling to account managing. Because I've seen this in Business Finland over the years. They may invest heavily in CRM or some solution, and nobody's trained internally, so nobody uses it. So they invested heavily, never got used. So there was a purchase, never adopted. So there's no opportunity to develop long-term relationship. And I'll end on the final barrier, which is usage. So from a sales perspective, I urge my companies to try to predict and overcome barriers to purchase, which come in here, and barriers to adoption, which is account management, and barriers to usage. Because, and I'll end on this note, because I think it's an important note to end on, if you don't visualize and understand how you can overcome barriers to usage, adoption, purchase, adoption and usage, you will never get customer lifetime value, which obviously is the holy grail for any company. Sustainability and repeatability, which equals customer lifetime value. Number of transactions times value of transactions over time. That is the holy grail for any company, because if you don't have customer lifetime value, because you don't have repeatability and scalability, you don't have the opportunity to grow your business, let alone domestically, let alone internationally. So on that note, because the time up thing is now screaming at me, because I'm now stealing time from our lovely case study. Any questions now, or we can save it? Okay, one.
Hi, this is Aya from Vita. Are you in LinkedIn, and are you intimidated if I send you an invitation? Are you an open LinkedIn?
Yes, I am. I use LinkedIn shamelessly because that's where I find most of my valuable contacts. So I use it so much they've almost banned me from you. I have to get our intern to log in as me because she uses my account. So no, of course, absolutely. Okay. I'm not intimidated at all by anybody connecting on LinkedIn. Absolutely. Or indeed, I'll give you my card, okay, so you can connect in other ways. Any other questions? We have a round table, so there are. Absolutely, yeah. My card. Of course you can. Anybody in this room is more than welcome to contact me via LinkedIn or indeed any mechanism. All right, thank you. Any other questions before we go to the case study and the round tables? Excellent. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I think we have time after after the wine tables also.
Yeah, yeah,
if
I'll be around.
time
Yeah,
is
yeah,
you
sure.
are Still here. But, yeah, thank you, Perry.
Okay, my pleasure.